Karen Whitmore had always been a nuisance. As the self-appointed queen of the HOA, she had made it her life's mission to make my existence a living hell. Heavy checkmark endless violation notices. Heavy checkmark harassing emails. Heavy checkmark random 911 calls for the dumbest reasons. She wasn't just a bad neighbor. She was an HOA tyrant. And after months of petty fines and power trips, she finally made her biggest mistake. She tried to evict me. But what she didn't know, I own the entire damn neighborhood. And she was about to find out in the most humiliating way possible. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when I heard a knock at my door. I opened it to find Alan, the HOA president, standing there, looking uncomfortable. "Hey, man," he said, rubbing his temples. I didn't want to do this, but Karen insisted. He handed me a folder. I opened it, and I burst out laughing. It was an official eviction notice from the HOA. Heavy checkmark, failure to adhere to community standards. Heavy checkmark, repeated violations of HOA regulations. Heavy checkmark, disrupting neighborhood harmony. I grinned. Let me guess. Karen wrote this? Alan sighed. She bullied the whole board into signing it. I smirked. Alan, I said, does Karen know who actually owns this neighborhood? Alan blinked. What? And that's when I told him everything. What Karen didn't know was that I had been quietly buying up properties in the neighborhood for months. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was part of an investment group that had recently finalized a full buyout of the development. Heavy checkmark the HOA no longer controlled the neighborhood. Heavy checkmark the property management company was under new ownership. Heavy checkmark and I was one of the new landlords. Which meant Karen had just tried to evict the person who could actually evict her. And I was about to make sure she learned that the hard way. Later that day, Karen posted in the neighborhood Facebook group. Community update. The HOA has officially moved to remove an undesirable element from our neighborhood. Property values must be protected. Lisa, my next-door neighbor, sent me a screenshot. Dude, she texted, she thinks she's won. I grinned. Oh, she's about to have a really bad day. That evening, the HOA held a special meeting. Karen walked in, smug as hell, ready to gloat about kicking me out. But when she saw me sitting at the front table, with Alan and the new property management team, her face twisted in confusion. Why is he here? She snapped. I stood up. Karen, I said, smiling, I have some news for you. Her smug expression faltered. What? I pulled out a stack of official documents and handed them to Alan. He cleared his throat and read aloud. As of last month, the entirety of this development was purchased by a private investment group. Effective immediately, the HOA no longer has authority over property ownership. Karen's face turned pale. She stammered. What does that mean? Alan looked at her. It means you don't own this neighborhood anymore, Karen. And the best part? I wasn't done yet. I pulled out one final document and placed it in front of her. Karen, I said, did you know your house is actually a rental? Her eyes widened. That's ridiculous. I smiled. Check the records, I said. You don't own your house. You lease it. Alan looked through the documents. Then his jaw dropped. Holy crap, he muttered. He's right. Karen's face went completely white. I leaned forward. And guess what? I said. The new owners of your rental property? That's us. Karen staggered back. No. I grinned. Karen, I said, you tried to evict me from a neighborhood I own. But you're just a tenant. She froze. Lisa, watching from the audience, barely contained her laughter. Dude, she whispered, she's about to self-destruct. And she did. Spectacularly. This isn't fair. Karen screamed. She turned to Alan. You can't let him do this. Alan sighed. Karen, you tried to evict the landlord. What did you think was gonna happen? Karen turned bright red. You're all against me, she shrieked. I smirked. Actually, Karen, I said, I'm feeling generous. She froze. I picked up her lease agreement and tapped it. See, you have two options. Heavy checkmark. Option 1. You follow the rules, stay quiet, and live out your lease like a normal person. Heavy checkmark. Option 2. I terminate your lease and you're out in 30 days. Karen's jaw dropped. You can't do this, she shrieked. I shrugged. Actually, I can. Because unlike you, I actually own property here. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Then she did the only thing she could. She stormed out of the meeting. And the neighborhood erupted into applause. The next morning, Karen's house had a "for rent" sign in front of it. She had officially given up. Lisa smirked. She lasted less than 24 hours after learning you own her lease. Tom laughed. She thought she was untouchable. And me? I sat back, sipping my coffee, finally free. No Karen. No HOA dictatorship. No stupid fines. Just peace and quiet. And the best part? A new rule was passed. No HOA member may attempt to evict another resident without property ownership rights. A rule inspired by Karen herself. I smiled. That's karma. A week after Karen's humiliating defeat, I woke up to something weird. Lisa knocked on my door, holding a clipboard. Dude, she said, barely containing her laughter. Karen is circulating a petition. I raised an eyebrow. For what? Lisa flipped it around, showing me the title. Remove unfit landlords from the community. I burst out laughing. You have to be kidding me. Lisa grinned. Nope. She's going door to door, trying to convince people to kick you out of your own neighborhood. I shook my head. This woman has zero self-awareness. Karen must have spent the entire day knocking on doors, trying to get signatures. By the afternoon, I got a group text from Alan, the HOA president. Alan, hey, just a heads up, Karen submitted a petition to remove bad landlords. It has 4 signatures. Lisa, OMG. Who signed? Alan, her husband, her cousin, and some random dude who doesn't even live here. Tom, lol. I grinned. Alan followed up. Alan, don't worry. We're rejecting it immediately. Just thought you'd enjoy the laugh. And honestly, I did. The next day, Karen went nuclear. Since the HOA had laughed her out of the room, she skipped the local authorities entirely and went straight to the State Housing Board. Lisa sent me a screenshot from the county website. Heavy checkmark. Karen had filed an official complaint, claiming I was operating an illegal rental scheme. Heavy checkmark. She accused me of manipulating property values for personal gain. Heavy checkmark. She even tried to claim I was abusing my power as a landlord. The best part? Her complaint was public. And the comment section? Absolutely destroyed her. Within hours, Karen's complaint went viral. Heavy checkmark. People flooded the comments with roasting. Heavy checkmark. Memes of her screaming at a clipboard started circulating. Heavy checkmark. Someone dug up her past HOA meltdowns from the news. And my favorite comment? Karen really tried to evict the guy who owns her lease. That's like getting mad at your landlord and trying to fire them from their own job. Lisa sent me a message. Bro, I think we just witnessed her final meltdown. I smirked. Let's make sure of it. Since Karen had falsely accused me of illegal activity, I called my lawyer. Hey, David, I said. What's the best way to handle a defamation case? David laughed. Oh, I've been waiting for this call. Heavy checkmark. We filed a formal cease and desist letter against Karen. Heavy checkmark. We threatened to sue for damages to my reputation. Heavy checkmark. The county board immediately rejected her claim as baseless. And the best part? The HOA fined her $2,500 for making fraudulent legal complaints. She was officially defeated. And this time, there was no coming back. A week later, a moving truck pulled up in front of Karen's house. Lisa took a picture and sent it to the neighborhood group chat. Heavy checkmark. Karen was leaving. Heavy checkmark. For good. Tom grinned. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Lisa smirked. We did it. And me? I just sat back, watching as Karen packed up her miserable life and left. For the last time. With Karen finally gone, the neighborhood was peaceful. Heavy checkmark. No more HOA dictatorships. Heavy checkmark. No more fake eviction attempts. Heavy checkmark. No more ridiculous complaints. And the best part? Lisa handed me a brand new plaque. Engraved on the front. The HOA Karen Slayer, destroyer of community tyrants. I laughed until I cried. Because if another Karen ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. After Karen moved out, the entire neighborhood celebrated. Heavy checkmark, no more HOA nonsense. Heavy checkmark, no more fake complaints. Heavy checkmark, no more clipboard patrols. For a few months, life was quiet. Then one morning, Lisa knocked on my door, looking worried. "Dude," she said, "Karen's house just sold." I blinked. "To who?" Lisa handed me her phone, and my stomach dropped. The listing said, "Sold to Evergreen Property Management Group." Evergreen, the same real estate company that had tried to buy out our neighborhood last year. And the worst part? They had already installed a new HOA enforcer. And she was about to make Karen look like a Girl Scout. A week later, the first violation notice arrived. Not from Karen. From Valerie. Heavy checkmark, new HOA policy. All homes must maintain uniform aesthetic, no personal decorations allowed. Heavy checkmark, new HOA security measures. Driveway cameras are now mandatory. Heavy checkmark, new compliance officer. All properties will be inspected weekly for violations. Lisa stormed over to my house, waving the letter. "Who the hell is Valerie Whitmore?" she demanded. I froze. Whitmore. No way. I pulled up the property records. And my jaw dropped. Valerie Whitmore was Karen's older sister. Karen was gone. But now, we had a new villain. And this time, she was way more dangerous. Within days, Valerie had declared war on the neighborhood. Heavy checkmark, she started issuing fines immediately. Heavy checkmark, she rewrote the HOA bylaws without a homeowner vote. Heavy checkmark, she installed cameras on HOA-owned streetlights. Lisa texted me at midnight. "Lisa, dude, this is worse than Karen." Me, how bad? Lisa, she just sent a fine for someone having an inflatable Halloween decoration. Me, oh, she's gonna be fun to destroy. And just like that, the war started again. I started digging. And what I found made my stomach turn. Heavy checkmark, Valerie wasn't just Karen's sister. Heavy checkmark, she was an executive at Evergreen Property Management. Heavy checkmark, her goal? Force people to sell, then redevelop the neighborhood into a luxury community. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was trying to take over. And I was about to stop her. We launched a full counterattack. Heavy checkmark filed a petition to remove Valerie. Heavy checkmark exposed her HOA violations to the media. Heavy checkmark got a city inspector to investigate her mandatory security cameras. And the best part? We found proof that she had been illegally altering HOA documents. At the next emergency meeting, Lisa stood up and smirked. "Hey, Valerie," she said. "Mind explaining why you rewrote the HOA bylaws without a homeowner vote?" Valerie froze. Then she stammered. We needed faster decision-making." Alan, the HOA president, held up the fraudulent documents. "Valerie," he said, "you just committed HOA fraud." And just like that, her entire plan collapsed. The HOA board immediately voted to remove Valerie. But she refused to leave. "I own this neighborhood," she shrieked. Lisa smirked. "No, you don't." Then the police arrived. Turns out, illegally installing surveillance cameras on private property is a crime. Valerie was arrested on the spot, and as the cops dragged her away, she screamed, "You haven't seen the last of me." Lisa grinned. "Yeah, actually we have." With Valerie gone, the HOA was completely restructured. Heavy checkmark, no more corruption. Heavy checkmark, no more power-hungry enforcers. Heavy checkmark, no more HOA dictatorship. Lisa smirked. "Dude, we just destroyed 2 Whitmores." Tom grinned. Back-to-back victories. And me? I sat back on my porch, Amazon packages stacked as high as I wanted. No Karen. No Valerie. Just peace and quiet. And the best part? A new HOA rule was passed. No member of the Whitmore family may ever serve on the HOA board. A rule inspired by Karen and Valerie themselves. I smiled. That's karma. It had been months since Valerie was arrested and removed from the HOA board. The neighborhood was finally peaceful. Heavy checkmark, no insane fines. Heavy checkmark, no HOA corruption. Heavy checkmark, no Whitmores. Or so I thought. Then, one afternoon, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, I saw her. An old woman, maybe in her late 70s, dressed in an expensive floral dress, clutching a leather handbag. She smiled politely. "Good afternoon, dear," she said. "I'm Eleanor Whitmore." I froze. Whitmore. Another one. Lisa peeked out from her window, eyes wide. "Dude," she texted me. "There's a final boss. Eleanor Whitmore. Heavy checkmark, Karen and Valerie's mother. Heavy checkmark, founder of the original HOA. Heavy checkmark, still legally owns several properties in the neighborhood. And now? She was back to finish what her daughters started. The next morning, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Heavy checkmark, notice of HOA leadership transition. Heavy checkmark, Eleanor Whitmore has been appointed as the new HOA president. Heavy checkmark, new policies will take effect immediately. Lisa ran over, fuming. "How?" she shouted. "We got rid of the Whitmores." I sighed. Apparently, their mother was waiting in the shadows. And then? The new fines started rolling in. Heavy checkmark, $250 for unapproved landscaping. Heavy checkmark, $500 for cluttered porches. Heavy checkmark, $1,000 for failing to meet community aesthetic standards. Lisa shook her head. This is a Whitmore revenge arc. And this time, it was personal. I started digging. And what I found made my stomach turn. Heavy checkmark, Eleanor had been planning this takeover for years. Heavy checkmark, she owned multiple homes in the neighborhood. Heavy checkmark, she was trying to force long-time homeowners out so she could sell to developers. This wasn't just about HOA control. This was a corporate real estate scam. And I was about to shut it down. Lisa and I rallied the neighborhood. Heavy checkmark, we gathered evidence. Heavy checkmark, we petitioned for a full HOA audit. Heavy checkmark, we called an emergency vote to remove Eleanor. At the next HOA meeting, Eleanor sat at the head of the table, looking calm and composed. Until Lisa stood up. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, holding up documents, "care to explain why you've been secretly selling HOA-controlled property?" Eleanor's smile twitched. Well, Tom smirked. "Because that's illegal." The room erupted, and just like that, her entire scam fell apart. Heavy checkmark, the HOA board voted to remove Eleanor. Heavy checkmark, the state launched a fraud investigation. Heavy checkmark, multiple homeowners sued for damages. And Eleanor? She was forced to sell all her properties and leave. Lisa grinned. "We beat all the Whitmores." Tom smirked. "A full sweep. And me?" I finally sat on my porch, drinking coffee, letting Amazon packages pile up. No Karen. No Valerie. No Eleanor. No Whitmores. Just peace and quiet. And the best part? A new HOA rule was passed. No member of the Whitmore family may ever serve on the HOA board. I smiled. That's karma. With Eleanor exposed and removed, the HOA was in chaos. Heavy checkmark, the board was leaderless. Heavy checkmark, the homeowners were angry. Heavy checkmark, for the first time, the HOA was weak. And that's when I had a crazy idea. I turned to Lisa and Tom. "What if," I said, "I just buy the whole damn HOA?" Lisa spit out her coffee. "Wait. What?" Tom laughed. "That's some evil genius energy." But I was dead serious. I was about to end HOAs forever. Over the next few months, I quietly bought out every HOA-controlled property that went up for sale. Heavy checkmark, a couple of foreclosed homes? Bought. Heavy checkmark, a few investment properties? Snatched up. Heavy checkmark, the old HOA clubhouse? Mine now. By the time I was done, I owned 51% of all HOA voting shares. Which meant I controlled the entire HOA. Lisa stared at the paperwork. "Dude," she whispered. "You just became the HOA president." I grinned. Not for long. Because I was about to do something no one had ever done before. At the next HOA meeting, the remaining board members sat nervously. They knew something was up. I stood up, cleared my throat, and made the biggest announcement in HOA history. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, I now legally own 51% of this HOA. The room gasped. Lisa smirked. Oh, this is about to be good. I smiled. And as my first and only act as HOA president, I hereby vote to dissolve this HOA permanently. The room exploded. You can't do that, one former HOA board member shrieked. Oh, I said, holding up my legal paperwork, I absolutely can. And just like that, the HOA was abolished. Forever. The very next morning, Lisa threw the biggest block party ever. Heavy check mark, no HOA fines. Heavy check mark, no stupid rules. Heavy check mark, no more Karen, Valerie, or Eleanor. People decorated their homes however they wanted. Tom set up inflatable dinosaurs in his front yard, just because he could. Lisa installed bright pink shutters on her house. And me? I sat on my porch, Amazon packages stacked up, knowing that no HOA would ever touch this place again. And the best part? Lisa handed me a brand new plaque. Engraved on the front. The HOA Karen Slayer, owner of the HOA, destroyer of community tyrants. I laughed until I cried. Because I had won. Forever. Heavy check mark, no HOA. Heavy check mark, no dumb fines. Heavy check mark, just peace and quiet. Lisa grinned. So, what's next? I smirked. Well, I hear there's an HOA nightmare happening in Florida. Lisa gasped. Road trip. And just like that, the HOA Karen Slayer's work was never truly done. For the first time in years, life was perfect. Heavy check mark, no HOA. Heavy check mark, no dumb rules. Heavy check mark, no Whitmores. But then, I got a letter in the mail. The return address? National HOA Alliance headquarters. I frowned. I opened the letter, and my stomach dropped. Dear homeowner, we have reviewed the recent dissolution of your HOA. This decision was made in violation of contractual agreements with the National HOA Alliance. Effective immediately, your neighborhood is under review for HOA reinstatement. Failure to comply may result in legal action. Sincerely, National HOA Oversight Committee. I stared at the paper. Lisa looked over my shoulder. And then? She burst out laughing. Dude, she gasped. The entire HOA industry is coming after you. I sighed. Guess I'm going to war one last time. I started digging. And what I found was insane. Heavy check mark, the National HOA Alliance is a multi-billion-dollar organization. Heavy check mark, they lobby for HOA expansion nationwide. Heavy check mark, they have a legal team that sues homeowners who try to escape HOAs. Lisa shook her head. They're like the mafia, but with clipboards. And now? I was their number one enemy. A week later, I got hit with a lawsuit. Heavy check mark, the HOA Alliance was suing me for neighborhood mismanagement. Heavy check mark, they were trying to forcibly reinstate the HOA. Heavy check mark, they wanted to put the Whitmores back in power. Lisa screamed. They're trying to bring back Karen? I smirked. Not on my watch. And just like that, I was about to take down the entire HOA industry. The lawsuit went viral. News stations picked it up. And then? I got an email from a U.S. senator. We'd like you to testify before Congress about HOA corruption. Lisa nearly fainted. Dude, you're about to end HOAs on a national level. And honestly, I was ready. I flew to Washington, D.C., sat in front of a panel of senators. And then? I exposed everything. Heavy check mark, the HOA industry's illegal lobbying. Heavy check mark, the fake fines used to push homeowners out. Heavy check mark, the Whitmore family's reign of terror. The room was silent. Then the senator leading the hearing sighed. This is worse than we thought. And just like that, Congress launched a national HOA investigation. Within 6 months, the fallout was massive. Heavy check mark, new laws were passed to restrict HOA power. Heavy check mark, the National HOA Alliance was sued for fraud. Heavy check mark, thousands of neighborhoods voted to abolish their HOAs. And the best part? The HOA industry lost billions. Lisa grinned. Dude, you just killed HOAs forever. And honestly, she was right. A year later, I sat on my porch, sipped coffee, watched as Amazon packages stacked up freely. Lisa handed me a brand new plaque. Engraved on the front. The HOA Karen Slayer, Destroyer of Homeowners Associations, National Edition. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. It started with a meme. Heavy check mark someone on Twitter posted. I'd vote for the HOA Karen Slayer for president. No more fines, no more HOAs, just freedom. Heavy check mark, then a petition popped up. Make the HOA Slayer run for Congress. Heavy check mark within a month? Over 1 million signatures. Lisa stared at my phone. Dude, she whispered. You have a political movement. And honestly, I was ready. Heavy checkmark people started protesting against HOA corruption. Heavy checkmark politicians began drafting anti-HOA legislation. Heavy checkmark homeowners started voting out corrupt HOA boards nationwide. And then, a political party formed. They called it the Anti-Karen Movement. And their slogan? Freedom from fines. Freedom from HOAs. Freedom from Karens. Lisa smirked. Dude, you have a legitimate shot at this. And just like that, I ran for office. Heavy checkmark, I announced my candidacy. Heavy checkmark, the internet exploded. Heavy checkmark, the HOA industry tried to fight back by launching a smear campaign. CNN ran a hit piece on me. The HOA Slayer, a danger to organized communities? Fox News asked. Is America ready for an anti-Karen president? Lisa smirked. Let's make them find out. And then? The election began. My opponent was a career politician funded by the HOA industry. At the presidential debate, he sneered. Heavy checkmark, you have no political experience. Heavy checkmark, you've never held office. Heavy checkmark, what makes you think you can run the country? I leaned into the mic. Heavy checkmark, sir, I took down the most powerful HOA in America. I exposed a multi-billion-dollar corruption scheme. I stood in front of Congress and destroyed the HOA industry. Heavy checkmark, and you think I can't handle Washington? The crowd went wild. And just like that, the election was mine. Election night. Heavy checkmark, homeowners across America voted in record numbers. Heavy checkmark, the anti-Karen movement won in a landslide. Heavy checkmark, I became the first president elected solely on an anti-HOA platform. Lisa screamed. Dude, you're the president. And honestly, I was ready. Heavy checkmark, I signed Executive Order Number 001. All HOAs in the United States are hereby abolished. All homeowners are free. Heavy checkmark, the stock market panicked. Heavy checkmark, the HOA industry collapsed. Heavy checkmark, Karen's mugshot was put in the Library of Congress as a historical relic. And the best part? Lisa handed me a final plaque. Engraved on the front. The HOA Karen Slayer, President of the United States, Destroyer of Community Tyrants. I laughed. Because if another Karen ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. It had been 5 years since I abolished HOAs on Earth. Heavy checkmark, no HOA fines. Heavy checkmark, no Karen complaints. Heavy checkmark, just freedom. Then, I got a call from NASA. Heavy checkmark, we need you for a mission. Heavy checkmark, we found something disturbing on Mars. Heavy checkmark, there are HOAs in space. I dropped my coffee. Lisa gasped. Dude, you have to go. And honestly, I was ready. NASA sent me to Mars to investigate. Heavy checkmark, the first human colony was thriving, but something was wrong. Heavy checkmark, astronauts were complaining about mystery finds. Heavy checkmark, a group called the Galactic Homeowners Alliance was running things. Lisa radioed in. Bro, is there a space Karen? I sighed. Lisa, we've got a serious problem. Because standing at the Martian HOA headquarters was a being I never expected. A Karen. An alien Karen. A Kron. And she was about to be my final enemy. Kron, leader of the Galactic Homeowners Alliance, sneered. Heavy checkmark, humans must follow the rules. Heavy checkmark, your landing pod violated aesthetic standards. Heavy checkmark, Martian property values must be protected. Lisa radioed in. Dude, she's literally a space Karen. I smirked. Then I guess I have to destroy her. Heavy checkmark, I led the first anti-HOA rebellion on Mars. Heavy checkmark, astronauts joined my fight. Heavy checkmark, NASA cut off all funding to the Galactic HOA. Kron screamed in rage. Heavy checkmark, you can't do this. Heavy checkmark, I am the law of the universe. I held up the Martian Constitution. Heavy checkmark, actually, Kron, you're in violation of Galactic Property Rights Act Section 7.3.2. Lisa cheered over the radio. Heavy checkmark, dude, you just destroyed the first intergalactic HOA. And just like that, the HOA was abolished. On Mars. Heavy checkmark, the Martians celebrated. Heavy checkmark, NASA declared me a hero. Heavy checkmark, Lisa sent a plaque to space. Engraved on the front. The HOA Karen Slayer, first president of Mars, destroyer of intergalactic tyrants. And as I looked out over the Martian sunset, I smiled. Because if another space Karen ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. Chapter 48, The Intergalactic HOA Empire. After freeing Mars, I returned to Earth a legend. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs anywhere in the solar system. Heavy checkmark, Martian homeowners finally had rights. Heavy checkmark, my face was printed on currency in 3 different space colonies. But then, NASA received a distress signal. Heavy checkmark, a deep space colony was under siege. Heavy checkmark, an unknown force was issuing ridiculous fines. Heavy checkmark, entire planets were being forced to maintain a uniform aesthetic. Lisa radioed in. Bro, tell me there isn't an intergalactic HOA. I sighed. Lisa, we have a bigger problem. Because this wasn't just one HOA. This was an empire. And at the center of it? A new villain. NASA sent me to the Andromeda Galaxy, where I found the source of the problem. Heavy checkmark, a massive space station the size of a planet. Heavy checkmark, millions of species trapped under HOA rule. Heavy checkmark, a dictator known only as the Supreme HOA Overlord. Lisa gasped. Wait, is that Karen's descendant? I zoomed in. And there, sitting on a golden throne, was an alien. A tall, blue-skinned woman with short blonde hair, resting bitch face, and a clipboard. Her name? Crean Whitmore. The final boss of the HOA empire. Crean sneered as I approached. Heavy checkmark, you are in violation of Galactic Rule 1A. No unauthorized rebellion against HOA policies. Heavy checkmark, your presence disrupts the aesthetic of this star system. Heavy checkmark, your spaceship is parked outside of designated visitor zones. Fine. 1 trillion credits. Lisa radioed in. Dude. It's Karen but galactic. I cracked my knuckles. Then I guess I have to destroy her. Heavy checkmark, I rallied the oppressed planets. Heavy checkmark, homeowners from across the galaxy joined my cause. Heavy checkmark, the HOA empire declared war on me. The battle was massive. Heavy checkmark, starfighters fought against clipboard-shaped drones. Heavy checkmark, massive HOA stations were bombed with property violation letters. Heavy checkmark, Lisa hacked the system and deleted 10 billion years worth of HOA fines. And then? I stormed Kreen's throne room. She hissed. Heavy checkmark, you can't do this. Heavy checkmark, HOAs are forever. I held up the Universal Homeowners Bill of Rights. Heavy checkmark, actually, Kreen, you're in violation of intergalactic law. Her clipboard shattered. The HOA empire collapsed. The galaxy was free. Heavy checkmark, Kreen was overthrown. Heavy checkmark, the galactic HOA was dismantled. Heavy checkmark, I was declared the supreme homeowner of the universe. Lisa laughed. Dude, you own the entire galaxy. I grinned. I guess that makes me the HOA Karen Slayer of the cosmos. And the best part? The entire universe issued a final decree. No HOA shall ever be allowed to exist again, anywhere in the known cosmos. I smiled. Because if another galactic HOA Karen ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. After freeing the galaxy, I thought I could finally relax. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in the solar system. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in the Andromeda Galaxy. Heavy checkmark, no galactic fines ruining property values. Then? Lisa ran into the command center, panicked. Dude, she gasped. HOAs still exist, in other universes. I frowned. Wait, what? She showed me the data. Heavy checkmark, the multiverse scanner detected HOA activity across infinite dimensions. Heavy checkmark, there were infinite Karens. Heavy checkmark HOAs were alive and well in the multiversal council of homeowners. And the worst part? They knew about me. A new message flashed on the screen. Multiversal HOA Council alert. Dimensional intruder detected. Subject: the HOA Karen Slayer. Threat level: extinction. Lisa gulped. Bro, you just pissed off the entire multiverse. I cracked my knuckles. Then I guess we finish this once and for all. I suited up. Heavy checkmark my ship was ready. Heavy checkmark my army of intergalactic homeowners was assembled. Heavy checkmark we had one goal: destroy HOAs in every universe. Lisa smirked. Ready to fight the final boss of HOA Karens? I grinned. Always. And then? We entered the multiverse. In an alternate dimension, I found it. Heavy checkmark a floating megastructure beyond time and space. Heavy checkmark the headquarters of the HOA Multiversal Council. Heavy checkmark HOA leaders from infinite realities. At the center? A throne. And sitting on it? The Prime Karen. She stood up, glaring at me. Heavy checkmark, you've destroyed our HOAs across galaxies. Heavy checkmark, you've ruined property values from one end of reality to the other. Heavy checkmark, but you will never defeat us all. I smirked. Watch me. Heavy checkmark I led an army of rebels from every timeline. Heavy checkmark homeowners from infinite dimensions rose up. Heavy checkmark the HOA Karens fought back with clipboard-shaped warships. Lisa hacked into their multiversal violation system. Heavy checkmark, I just erased all their fines. Heavy checkmark, they have NO power now. The Karens screamed. Nua. The HOA headquarters collapsed. And just like that, every HOA in every timeline was erased. Forever. Heavy checkmark HOAs ceased to exist in every universe. Heavy checkmark Karen was banished to the void of bureaucracy. Heavy checkmark I was declared the supreme homeowner of the multiverse. Lisa handed me one last plaque. Engraved on the front. The HOA Karen Slayer, master of the multiverse, destroyer of infinite community tyrants. I laughed. Because if another Karen ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. After freeing the multiverse, I finally sat down. Heavy checkmark no more HOAs in any dimension. Heavy checkmark the Karen threat erased from history. Heavy checkmark peace at last. Or so I thought. Then, a new message appeared in the sky. Reality code violation detected. Subject: the HOA Karen Slayer. Prepare for final judgment. Lisa ran over, panicking. Dude, who is left to fight? I stared at the screen. Because this wasn't just a regular HOA. This was the Architects of Order. Heavy checkmark the first HOA. Heavy checkmark the ones who created property laws across reality. Heavy checkmark the HOA that existed before the beginning of time itself. Lisa's hands shook. Bro, we just pissed off the gods of HOAs. I smirked. Then let's take them down. I stepped beyond reality itself. Heavy checkmark planets crumbled under ancient HOA laws. Heavy checkmark timelines were erased for not meeting cosmic design standards. Heavy checkmark the Architects of Order ruled it all. At the center of the chaos? A colossal throne. Sitting on it? The first Karen. A being of pure bureaucracy. Her name? Karen the Eternal. Heavy checkmark, you have undone our work. Heavy checkmark, you have disrupted order across the omniverse. Heavy checkmark, you must be fined. Infinitely. Lisa screamed. We found the final boss of Karens. I clenched my fists. Then let's finish this. Heavy checkmark reality itself became the battlefield. Heavy checkmark I led an army of rebels from every timeline. Heavy checkmark the Architects of Order unleashed cosmic clipboard weapons. Karen pointed at me. Heavy checkmark, you cannot escape the fine of eternity. A massive golden HOA violation notice materialized. I caught it midair. And then? I ripped it in half. The HOA gods screamed. The laws of reality shattered. And just like that, the last HOA was erased. Forever. Heavy checkmark HOAs ceased to exist in every possible reality. Heavy checkmark Karen was erased from cosmic memory. Heavy checkmark I was declared the supreme homeowner of the omniverse. Lisa handed me one last plaque. Engraved on the front. The HOA Karen Slayer, master of all existence, destroyer of eternal community tyrants. I laughed. Because if another Karen ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. I had finally done it. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in any timeline. Heavy checkmark, no more Karen dictatorships. Heavy checkmark, the universe was free. Then, Lisa's voice crackled over the omniversal comm link. Dude? We have a problem. I sighed. Lisa, there are no HOAs left. She gulped. Yeah, about that. I just got a fine. I froze. What? She held up a golden document, pulsing with raw energy. Heavy checkmark, reality infraction notice. Heavy checkmark, subject, the HOA Karen Slayer. Heavy checkmark, penalty, total reinstatement of all HOAs. I grabbed the document. Because this wasn't from any normal HOA. This came from beyond reality itself. Lisa whispered, Bro, there's one last HOA. I clenched my fists. Then let's end this. I tracked the source of the fine. It led to a dimensional void beyond the omniverse. Heavy checkmark, a fortress made of pure bureaucracy. Heavy checkmark, eldritch clipboards floating in the air. Heavy checkmark, a sign that read, the HOA Council of the Metarealm. Lisa read the inscription aloud. Heavy checkmark, beyond time, beyond space. HO compliance is eternal. I scowled. Not anymore. Inside the fortress, they were waiting. Heavy checkmark, thousands of Karens from deleted realities. Heavy checkmark, a table made of violation notices. Heavy checkmark at the center? The final HOA goddess. She stood, her presence warping reality. Heavy checkmark, I am Crinthia, keeper of the eternal HOA. Heavy checkmark, you may have destroyed the others. Heavy checkmark, but HOAs are the foundation of order. Lisa grabbed my shoulder. Dude, this is the Karen above all Karens. Crinthia raised a single hand. And then? Reality itself find me. A massive document materialized in the sky. Heavy checkmark, subject, the HOA Karen Slayer. Heavy checkmark, violation, destroying HOA order. Heavy checkmark, penalty, reinstatement of all HOAs across all realities. Lisa screamed. Dude, she's resetting everything. I clenched my fists. Not on my watch. Heavy checkmark, I summoned every anti-HOA rebel in history. Heavy checkmark, the Council of Karens unleashed cosmic HOA enforcers. Heavy checkmark, the fate of all reality hung in the balance. Crinthia raised her hands. Heavy checkmark, you cannot win. Order must be maintained. I grinned. Heavy checkmark, then I guess I'll break the rules one last time. And then? I ripped the fine of reality in half. Heavy checkmark, the Council of Karens screamed in horror. Heavy checkmark, their power faded as their laws crumbled. Heavy checkmark, the Metarealm collapsed. Crinthia fell to her knees. Heavy checkmark, this cannot be. Lisa smirked. Oh, but it can. And just like that, the final HOA was erased. Forever. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in any reality. Heavy checkmark, no cosmic fines. Heavy checkmark, just freedom. Lisa grinned. Okay, but this time it's really over, right? I smirked. Unless there's an HOA hiding in the afterlife, I'd say we won. And the best part? A final decree was issued across the metaverse. No HOA shall ever exist again, across time, space, or reality. I smiled. Because if another Karen ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. And with that, the war is over. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in any universe. Heavy checkmark, no Karens left to enforce petty fines. Heavy checkmark, the multiverse, the omniverse, and even the Metarealm are free. I can finally sit on my porch, drink my coffee, and let my Amazon packages pile up as high as I want. Lisa hands me one last plaque. Engraved on the front. The HOA Karen Slayer, defender of freedom, destroyer of community tyrants, master of the multiverse. I laugh. Because if another HOA ever dares to rise, well, they'll know exactly who they're dealing with.